Tipallattha Miga Jataka, in all three postures. This story was told by the master while dwelling in the Bhadarika monastery in Kosambi, about the elder monk Rahul whose heart was set on observing the rules of the brotherhood. Once when the master was living in the Agalava temple hard by the town of Alavi, many female lay disciples and sisters used to flock there to hear the truth preached. The preaching was in the daytime, but as time wore on, the women did not attend, and there were only brethren and men disciples present. Then the preaching took place in the evening, and at the close the elder brethren retired each to his own chamber. But the younger ones with the lay disciples lay down to rest in the service hall. When they fell asleep, loud was the snoring and snorting and gnashing of teeth as they lay. After a short slumber some got up, and reported to the Lord Buddha the wrong act which they had seen. Said he, "If a brother sleeps in the company of novices, it is a pasatya offense." And after delivering this commandment he went away to Kosambi. On that the brethren said to the Reverend Rahul, "Sir, the Lord Buddha has laid down this rule, and now you will please find quarters of your own." Now, before this, the brethren, out of respect for the father and because of the anxious desire of the son to observe the rules of the brotherhood, had welcomed the youth as if the place were his. They had fitted up a little bed for him, and had given him a cloth to make a pillow with. But on the day of our story, they would not even give him house room, so fearful were they of doing wrong. The excellent Rahul went neither to the Buddha as being his father, nor to Sariputra, captain of the faith, as being his instructor, nor to the great Moggallana as being his teacher, nor to the elder monk Ananda as being his uncle, but took himself to the Buddha's outdoor chamber grounds and took up his dwelling there as though in a heavenly mansion. Now in a Buddha's outdoor grounds the door is always closely shut. The leveled floor is of perfumed earth. Flowers and garlands are festooned round the walls, and all night long a lamp burns there. But it was not this splendor which prompted Rahul to take up his residence here. No, it was simply because the brethren had told him to find quarters for himself, and because he reverenced instruction and yearned to observe the rules of the order. Indeed, from time to time the brethren, to test him, when they saw him coming from quite a distance, used to throw down a hand broom or a little dust sweepings, and then ask who had thrown it down, after Rahul had come in. "Well, Rahul came that way," would be the remark, but never did the future elder monk say he knew nothing about it. On the contrary, he used to remove the litter and humbly ask pardon of the brother, nor go away till he was assured that he was pardoned. So anxious was he to observe the rules. And it was solely this anxiety which made him take up his living in the outdoor grounds. Now, though day had not yet dawned, the master halted at the door of the outdoor grounds and coughed, "Ahum." "Ahum," responded the Reverend Rahul. "Who is there?" said the Buddha. "It is I, Rahul," was the reply. And out came the young man and bowed low. "Why have you been sleeping here, Rahul?" "Because I had nowhere to go to. Up till now, sir, the brethren have been very kind to me. But such is their present fear of erring that they won't give me shelter any more. Consequently, I took up my dwelling here, because I thought it a spot where I should not come into contact with anybody else." Then thought the master to himself, "If they treat even Rahul like this, what will they not do to other youths whom they admit to the order?" And his heart was moved within him for the truth. So, at an early hour he had the brethren assembled, and questioned the captain of the faith thus, "I suppose you at all events, Sariputra, know where Rahul is now quartered?" Single quote. "No, sir, I do not." Sariputra, Rahul was living this day in the outdoor grounds. Sariputra, if you treat Rahul like this, what will not be your treatment of other youths whom you admit to the order? Such treatment will not retain those who join us. In future, keep your novices in your own quarters for a day or two, and only on the third day let them lodge out, taking care to acquaint yourself with their lodging. With this rider, the master laid down the rule. Gathering together in the hall of truth, the brethren spoke of the goodness of Rahul. See, sirs, how anxious was Rahul to observe the rules. When told to find his own lodging, he did not say, "I am the son of the Buddha. What have you to do with quarters? You turn out." No, not a single brother did he oust, but quartered himself in the outdoor grounds. As they were talking thus, the master came to the hall and took his seat on his throne of state, saying, "What is the subject of your talk, brethren?" "Sir," was the reply, "we were talking of the anxiety of Rahul to keep the rules, nothing else." Then said the master, "This anxiety Rahul has shown not only now, but also in the past, when he had been born an animal." And so saying, he told this story of the past. Once upon a time a certain king of Magadha was reigning in Rajgraha city. And in those days the Bodhisattva, having been born a stag, was living in the forest at the head of a herd of deer. Now his sister brought her son to him, saying, "Brother, teach your nephew here the tricks of deer." "Certainly," said the Bodhisattva. "Go away now, my boy, and come back at such and such a time to be taught." Punctually at the time his uncle mentioned, the young stag was there and received instruction in the tricks of deer. One day as he was moving in the woods he was caught in a snare and uttered the sad cry of a captive. Away fled the herd and told the mother of her son's capture. She came to her brother and asked him whether his nephew had been taught the tricks of deer. "Fear not. Your son is not at fault," said the Bodhisattva. "He has learnt thoroughly deer's tricks, and will come back straightway to your great rejoicing." And so saying, he repeated this stanza. In all three postures, on his back or sides. Your son is versed. He's trained to use 8 hoofs. And except at midnight never satisfies his thirst. As he lies couched on earth, he lifeless seems. And only with his under nostril breathes. 6 tricks my nephew knows to cheat his rivals. Thus did the Bodhisattva console his sister by showing her how thoroughly her son had mastered the tricks of deer. Meantime the young stag on being caught in the snare did not struggle, but lay down at full length on his side, with his legs stretched out taut and rigid. He pawed up the ground round his hoofs so as to shower the grass and earth about. Relieved nature. Let his head fall. Lolled out his tongue. Beslavered his body all over. Swelled himself out by coming in the wind. Turned up his eyes. Breathed only with the lower nostril, holding his breath with the upper one. And made himself generally so rigid and so stiff as to look like a corpse. Even the blue bottles swarmed round him. And here and there crows settled. The hunter came up and smacked the stag on the belly with his hand, remarking, "He must have been caught early this morning. He's going bad already." So saying, the man untied the stag from his bonds, saying to himself, "I'll cut him up here where he lies, and take the flesh home with me." But as the man simply set to work to gather sticks and leaves, the young stag rose to his feet, shook himself, stretched out his neck, and, like a little cloud speeding before a mighty wind, went swiftly back to his mother. After repeating what he had said as to Rahul's having shown no less anxiety in time past to keep rules than in the present, The master made the relation and identified the birth by saying, Rahul was the young stag of those days, Tipallattha his mother, and I the stag his uncle. Jataka number. Māluta Jataka. In light or dark. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery about two brethren who had joined the brotherhood in their old age. Tradition says that they were living in a forest living in the Kosala country, and that one was named the elder Dark and the other the elder Light. Now one day Light said to Dark, Sir, at what time does what is called cold appear? It appears in the dark half of the month. And one day Dark said to Light, Sir, at what time does what is called cold appear? It appears in the light half of the month. As the pair of them together could not solve the question, they went to the master and with due salutation asked, saying, Sir, at what time does what is called cold appear? After the master had heard what they had to say, he said, Brethren, in past days also, I answered for you this same question. But your previous existences have become forgotten in your minds. And so saying, he told this story of the past. Once upon a time at the foot of a certain mountain, there were living together in one and the same cave two friends, a lion and a tiger. The Bodhisattva too was living at the foot of the same hill, as a hermit. Now one day a debate arose between the two friends about the cold. The tiger said it was cold in the dark half of the month, while the lion maintained that it was cold in the light half. As the two of them together could not settle the question, they put it to the Bodhisattva. He repeated this stanza, In light or dark half, whensoever the wind did blow, it is cold. For cold is caused by wind. And, therefore, I decide you both are right. Thus did the Bodhisattva make peace between those friends. When the master had ended his lesson in support of what he had said as to his having answered the same question in past days, he preached the four truths, at the close of which both of the elder monks won the fruit of the first path. The master explained the relation and identified the birth, by saying, Dark was the tiger of those days, Light the lion, and I myself the ascetic who answered the question. Jataka number. Matakabhatta Jataka. If folk but knew. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery about feasts for the dead. For at this time the folk were putting to death goats, sheep, and other animals, and offering them up as what is called a feast for the dead, for the sake of their departed kinsmen. Finding them thus engaged, the brethren asked the master, saying, Just now, sir, the folk are taking the lives of many living creatures and offering them up as what is called a feast for the dead. Can it be, sir, that there is any good in this? No, brethren, replied the master. Not even when life is taken with the object of providing a feast for the dead, does any good arise from that. In past days the wise, preaching the truth from mid-air, and showing the evil consequences of the practice, made the whole continent renounce it. But now, when their previous existences have become confused in their minds, the practice has came up afresh. And, so saying, he told this story of the past. Once upon a time when Brahmadatta was reigning in Benares, a Brahmin, who was versed in the three Vedas and world-famed as a teacher, he thought to offer a feast for the dead, had a goat fetched and said to his pupils, My sons, take this goat down to the river and bathe it. Then hang a garland round its neck, give it a pottle of grain to eat, groom it a bit, and bring it back. Very good, said they, and down to the river they took the goat, where they bathed and groomed the creature and set it on the bank. The goat, becoming conscious of the deeds of its past lives, was overjoyed at the thought that on this very day it would be freed from all its misery, and laughed aloud like the smashing of a pot. Then at the thought that the Brahman by killing it would bear the misery which it had carried, the goat felt a great compassion for the Brahman, and wept with a loud voice. "Friend goat," said the young Brahmans, "your voice has been loud both in laughter and in weeping. What made you laugh and what made you weep? Ask me your question before your master." So with the goat they came to their master and told him of the matter. After hearing their story, the master asked the goat why it laughed and why it wept. On this the animal, recalling its past deeds by its power of remembering its former existences, spoke thus to the Brahman. "In times past, Brahman, I, like you, was a Brahman versed in the mystic texts of the Vedas, and I, to offer a feast for the dead, killed a goat for my offering. All through killing that single goat, I have had my head cut off 500 times all but one. This is my 500th and last birth. And I laughed aloud when I thought that this very day I should be freed from my misery. On the other hand, I wept when I thought how, while I, who for killing a goat had been doomed to lose my head 500 times, was today being freed from my misery, you, as a penalty for killing me, would be doomed to lose your head, like me, 500 times. Thus it was out of compassion for you that I wept. Fear not, goat," said the Brahman. "I will not kill you." "What is this you say, Brahman?" said the goat. "Whether you kill me or not, I cannot escape death today. Fear not, goat. I will go about with you to guard you. Weak is your protection, Brahman, and strong is the force of my evil doing." Setting the goat at liberty, the Brahman said to his disciples, "Let us not allow anyone to kill this goat." And, accompanied by the young men, he followed the animal closely about. The moment the goat was set free, it reached out its neck to graze on the leaves of a bush growing near the top of a rock. And that very instant a thunderbolt struck the rock, tearing off a mass which hit the goat on the outstretched neck and tore off its head. And people came crowding round. In those days the Bodhisattva had been born a tree fairy in that same spot. By his supernatural powers he now seated himself cross-legged in mid-air while all the crowd looked on. Thinking to himself, "If these creatures only knew the fruit of evil doing, perhaps they would desist from killing." In his sweet voice he taught them the truth in this stanza. If folk but knew the penalty would be birth unto sorrow, living things would cease from taking life. Tough is the killer's doom. Thus did the great being preach the truth, scaring his hearers with the fear of hell. And the people, hearing him, were so terrified at the fear of hell that they left off taking life. And the Bodhisattva, after establishing the people in the commandments by preaching the truth to them, passed away to fare according to his deeds. The people, too, remained devoted in the teaching of the Bodhisattva and spent their lives in charity and other good works, so that in the end they crowded the city of the Devas. His lesson ended, the master explained the relation, and identified the birth by saying, "In those days I was the tree fairy." Jataka number. Āyācitabhatta Jataka. Take thought of life hereafter. This story was told by the master while at Jetavana monastery about the offering of a sacrifice under vow to gods. Tradition says that in those days folk, when going a journey on business, used to kill living creatures and offer them as a sacrifice to gods, and set out on their way, after making this vow, "If we come safely back with a profit, we will give you another sacrifice." And when they did come safely back with a profit, the idea that this was all due to gods made them kill a number of living creatures and offer them up as a sacrifice to obtain a release from their vow. When the brethren became aware of this, They asked the Lord Buddha, saying, "Can there be any good in this, sir?" The Lord Buddha told this story of the past. Once upon a time in the Kasi country, the assistant of a high official of a certain little village had promised to sacrifice to the fairy of a banyan tree which stood at the entrance to the village. Afterwards, when he returned, he killed a number of creatures and took himself to the tree to get released from his vow. But the tree fairy, standing in the fork of its tree, repeated this stanza. Take thought of life hereafter when you seek release. For this release is bondage strict. Not thus the wise and good release themselves. For this, the fool's release, in bondage ends. From then on, men abstained from such taking of life, and by walking in righteousness crowded thereafter the city of the Devas. His lesson ended, the master explained the relation and identified the birth, by saying, "I was the tree fairy of those days."